Chapter 467. The Indian Maidservant and the Old Saudi Man, Section 2. Rayhana speculated correctly, but arrived at a conclusion that was far from the truth. It was true that the old man was interested in her because she was a Muslim woman, but there was more to his favor than just her religion. Her marvelous beauty and young age were his main attraction. Yet, this in itself was not why his fondness for her was growing. Her refusal to offer her body for thousands of rupees was yet another important reason that assured him she wasn't lady of the night. But, this was not the only cause of his budding obsession. To understand the reason that led this old Saudi into a crazed longing for this radiant, vibrant young Indian woman, we need to go back a few years and dig out some pleasant and unpleasant memories of his life in India. Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed came to India for the first time 5 years before. At that time, he was just 64 years old and had 4 wives and many sons and daughters. In fact, he married more than 4 women in his life, but the Islamic Sharia law would not allow him to keep more than 4 wives at the same time. All of his wives were Saudi. In Saudi Arabia, it is forbidden for any citizen of that kingdom to marry an outsider, so citizens had to contend with Saudi wives. The law of his country would not allow him to marry an Arab from another Arab country even if she was a Muslim. Let us recall the case of a Saudi princess who fell in love with an Egyptian national, a man who happened to be one of her many foreign servants. She knew she could not marry him while they were in the kingdom of Saudi Arabia even though he was Muslim. For this reason, she decided to leave the country and elope with him. She took on a male identity and dressed to suit the role. Unfortunately, she was caught at the airport and then summarily executed along with her Egyptian boyfriend. A movie of her story, called The Death of a Princess, was banned in Saudi Arabia and all the Arab countries. Anyway, when Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed first came to India, it was as a tourist. A famous Egyptian journalist rightly said that the tourism of the Arab man is the woman. Everywhere the Arab men went, they always looked for women. They never bother of visiting even one tourist site. Of course, there are many reasons for their obsession. No one should hastily conclude that the Arab man lusts after sex and women more than men of any other nationality or culture. Neither is the reason attributable to their sexual abilities to marry 4 women at the same time. The main reason for their sexual predation is their religious upbringing, imposed upon them from an early age, a total segregation of male and female. Arab males are not allowed to mix with the Arab females even as children. In their homes, segregation of genders is carried to an extreme with sections cordoned off for males and females. These 2 sections are separated from each other like public washrooms, men and women. It is strictly forbidden at any time and under any circumstances for either of the sexes to mix or set foot in the restricted areas. For this reason, the Arab male is not allowed to enjoy bonding with his baby sister as a little boy. The restrictions grew tighter as they grew older. Beginning at school age, the males attend an all-boys school and the females attend the all-girls school. Of course, this strict segregation between males and females has led to adverse social consequences for both men and women. The homosexuality rate in Saudi Arabia to date is alarming to say the least. Rape crimes are common in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Many young female children are raped by their uncles and cousins and brothers. Women sometimes get raped inside elevators. In the villages, whenever young boys find the chance, they would catch their own sisters and either sodomize them, or just dry hump them from behind until they ejaculate. Moreover, bestiality is a common practice in the Arab countries. Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed was neither a womanizer nor a sexual pervert. He was just another run-of-the-mill Arab suffering from sexual frustration. If he had sex with 100 women, he would still not be satisfied. By the way, in Colaba sometimes you can see an Arab man with as many as 6 Indian prostitutes in a hotel room. Many times, whenever the Bombay police decide to crack down on prostitution, the front page of the newspapers would feature a story of an Arab man caught with half a dozen prostitutes in his hotel room. The funniest thing would be the fact that not all these prostitutes might be Indians. Some of them would be from Nepal. Although Nepalese girls are not as pretty as Indian girls, Arabs still prefer them. The main reason is that Indian prostitutes for the most part will not allow their customers to sodomize them, even if they are offered thousands of rupees, while most Nepalese prostitutes do not mind anal sex at all. Besides, the backsides of Nepalese girls are much larger and wider than the Indian girls. Don't ask me why the Arabs like women with large backsides. I admit that I have no answer for that question, although I could make a reasonable guess. It isn't only the Arab man, but the African male that also shares the same penchant. One can understand the problem of the African man. African women do not conform to the media ideal of beauty, and probably use their large backsides and spear-like breasts to attract men. On the other hand, the Arab girls are prettier than the African girls and should have had no problem attracting males. Even though, due to the segregation between sexes and the total concealment of her face and her other feminine qualities, the Arab woman was forced to develop other means to attract the opposite sex. She would deliberately gorge herself with food in order to develop a buxom physique, deemed desirable in the Middle East. Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed, on his first visit to India, desperately fell in love with a Christian girl that caught his eye. Of course, it was a one-sided love affair because he was 64 years old and the girl was only 20. Sheikh Ahmed hated Hindu girls, and if you offered him the Bollywood superstar and former Miss World, Aishwarya Rai, he would not marry her because she was a polytheist. He would not mind to have sex with her, but he would never ever marry her. His Quran forbids marriage to a polytheist woman. It's funny how a Muslim man is allowed to commit adultery with a polytheist and even rape her, but he's not allowed to marry her. The Prophet Muhammad and his companions did the same. According to Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, the Apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, sent a military expedition to Autaz on the occasion of the Battle of Hunan. They met their enemy and fought with them. They defeated them and took them captives. Some of the companions of the Apostle of Allah were reluctant to have intercourse with the female captives in the presence of their husbands who were polytheists. So Allah, the Exalted, sent down the Quranic verse, and all married women are forbidden unto you save those captives whom your right hands possess. Sunan Abu Dawud, page number 2150. Accordingly, in this way, a Muslim man is allowed to marry three types of women: Muslim women, Jewish women, and Christian women. In addition, he is permitted to have sex with any other female, including a Hindu, Buddhist, Satanist, or even an atheist. Again, he just cannot marry her. Some schools of the Sharia law state that these women should be possessed as war booties. Now, 5 years ago, Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed saw this pretty young Christian girl while he was staying in the Taj Mahal Hotel. The girl was working in the housekeeping department of the hotel. He saw her when she came along with another girl to clean up his luxurious suite. His soul clung to this lovely picture of perfection, and he was determined to get her no matter how much it might cost him and no matter what the risk. He bribed the bellboy and asked him to convince the young lady to sleep with him. He promised to pay whatever the asking price. The bellboy returned with an answer from the young woman: not interested in your money. Moreover, the bellboy told the old man that the girl was a Christian and she was originally from the city of Goa. Instead of being discouraged, Sheikh Ahmed's interest escalated. He claimed to have fallen in love with her at first sight. One good thing about him was that he had high respect for any woman who would not surrender her body no matter how much a man might offer her. Moreover, Sheikh Ahmed knew that his religion allowed him to marry a Christian girl, so he was determined to get as much information as he could about her. He told the bellboy to find out where she was staying in Bombay and whether she was married or not. In a short period of time, the bellboy was able to ascertain that she was still single. He also bribed someone in the housekeeping department and obtained her address from the application she filled out when she applied for the job at the hotel. The old man, of course, compensated the housekeeping manager amply for his treasure trove of information. After that, Sheikh Ahmed went with the bellboy and met the parents of the girl and offered them many things in exchange for their daughter's hand in marriage. He promised to buy them a house in a very exclusive area. The girl's parents were poor and lived in a house little better than a slum shanty. There were houses in Bombay called chawls. A chawl was neither a real house as people in the West would call a home, nor was it a slum where Rehana and her children lived like eggs stuffed inside a carton. In the chawl you could have electricity and tap water and a few other necessities. However, in the chawl you would not have your own washroom. Chawls had common areas with public washrooms. The chawl dwellers are not rich people and they are not that poor, but they should not be confused with the middle-class people of the West. Chawl residents are usually gainfully employed and generally educate their children. Only the rich send their children to private schools. The rich people do not send their children to public schools because children of rich families often get kidnapped for ransom by gangsters of the underworld. Christina Lobaz was the Christian girl Sheikh Ahmed had his eye on. Her family and friends called her Christy. She studied up to grade 11. She was the eldest in her family and had 4 siblings after her. Her father was a drunkard and rarely went to work. He had been fired many times due to his heavy drinking. Because of the father's alcoholic binges, it was a daily struggle for Christy's mother, who was trying to raise her and her 2 brothers and 2 sisters. When Christy was in grade 12, her mother lost her eyesight and became blind. Therefore, Christy left school and began to work. At this young age, she had to contend with being sexually harassed wherever she worked. Christy then fell in love with a Christian boy called Bobby. Although Bobby was also from a poor family and living in the chawls, he was a very intelligent young man. He worked in small hotels and motels in Bombay before he finally went to work in the Gulf country of Kuwait and worked there for 2 years. He could not marry Christy because he had a huge responsibility towards his large family. He had to take care of his 4 brothers, 5 sisters, and his parents. He made a promise to Christy that one day he would come back to India and marry her and bring her with him to live. Unfortunately, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and Bobby, like many other foreign workers, had to run for their lives. He returned to India empty-handed and could not fulfill his promise to marry his dream girl, the one he cared for so deeply. Instead, he went back to his small job in a motel and continued to support his family. Although Bobby was struggling to support his family, he still approached Christy's parents and expressed his love and proposal to marry her. Christy's parents strongly rejected this proposition and kicked him out of their chawl. About that same time, Christy had already started working housekeeping at the Taj Mahal Hotel. She was now the only breadwinner in the family. In India, if a girl married, she would become the property of her husband and in-laws. Her family, therefore, could not hope to see a single rupee of her wages. Nonetheless, the love between Bobby and Christy continued to grow. Bobby suggested they get married at the local court, run away together and just forget about their families. Christy strongly rejected this idea because both her parents were disabled, her mother was blind and her father was constantly in an alcohol-induced stupor. She decided to sacrifice her dreams of marriage and having a family of her own until God provide a way for them to be united in wedded bliss. As it seemed, God was indeed working out a miracle and in a most unexpected way. Her disabled parents felt as if God himself had come down from heaven through divine intervention when the wealthy business tycoon, Sheikh Ahmed, approached them and pleaded for their daughter's hand in marriage in exchange for all that riches could bring. He had much to offer and was willing to give the whole world to them when he fell in love with their beautiful Christina. Well, the parents were simply overjoyed and happy to accept this outstanding proposal. They promised Sheikh Ahmed they would convince their daughter to marry him. They were not in the least bothered about the old man's age. This didn't disturb them at all, nor did they consider their daughter's love for her boyfriend, Bobby. They imposed considerable pressure on their daughter until she succumbed to their demands. At first, Christie refused and strongly rejected this marriage proposal. She threatened to burn herself alive if her parents tried to force her to marry him. However, she started to have second thoughts on the matter. She calculated and studied her options. She needed to wait for at least another 10 years until all her siblings would finish their education and began to work and support themselves. At that time, her boyfriend might get tired of waiting and decide to marry someone else without all the hassle. Moreover, after 10 years her age might be another factor for her boyfriend and his family to reject her. Christie then realized that Sheikh Ahmed could be a shortcut to fulfill her dreams and marry her true love. Before she made a commitment to the old man, she talked to Bobby and disclosed to him her secret plan. Although hesitant, her boyfriend found her plan to be the only anchor that would snatch them from their desperate situation and move them closer to their goal of being together. So the plan was set in motion. Christie would marry the old man, but she established certain conditions. One of her conditions was she would stay in her own country to oversee the welfare of her parents and siblings. If he wanted to marry her, he had to agree to this term and she would accept his proposal. She would remain a resident of India and he could travel between the two countries to visit her. Not only did Sheikh Ahmed accept this condition, but he was overjoyed to hear of it. It was exactly what he had in mind. He knew that the law of his country would not allow him to marry a non-Saudi woman and bring her to his country. Secondly, the kind of marriage that Christie asked for was called in the Sharia law, Zawaj al-Mihyar. Al-Mihyar is an official marriage institution in Islam, which allows for a lesser form of relationship between a man and a woman other than the normal marriage arrangement. The regulations governing Al-Mihyar do not require that a married couple live together, but Al-Mihyar allows the man to have another wife in addition to his primary wives. The Mihyar wife is expected to live with her parents, and her husband can visit her according to a predetermined schedule or agreement. Al-Mihyar marriage has been practiced in Saudi Arabia and Egypt for many years. Christie also demanded that Sheikh Ahmed should buy one house for her and one house for her parents and siblings. Moreover, he should give her a dowry of 5 million Indian rupees. Sheikh Ahmed agreed to buy the two houses and give Christie 5 million rupees. But, he himself countered with an important stipulation. His requirement was for Christie to stop working immediately and be a housewife instead. Christie gladly accepted this condition because it would relieve her from the drudgery of working long, hard days for meager wages. When both parties came to an amiable agreement of the terms that were beneficial to each, the marriage took place. Sheikh Ahmed spent only a couple of weeks with his new bride and then flew back to his country. As soon as he returned to his country, Christie had Bobby move into her beautiful home, courtesy of Sheikh Ahmed. This was more than she could have asked of her wonderful God and Creator, to be able to enjoy all that life had in store and the wealth supplied her by her rich Saudi husband. And what's more, she was enjoying every moment of it with her Indian boyfriend. In those days, Sheikh Ahmed had 4 Saudi wives. He divorced one of them in order to make a room for his young Indian wife. He often boasted to his elite group of wealthy Saudi friends about his young pretty Indian wife. His friends did not blame him because Islam permitted him to marry 4 women at the same time, and also he was allowed by Sharia law to marry a Christian girl. His friends were quite envious of the prize he had acquired after seeing his wedding photos of his young Indian bride sitting by his side in her wedding gown. At the time of their marriage, Christie was 20 years old and 1 month. Sheikh Ahmed was 64 years old and 11 months. Although the difference between the two was 44 years and 10 months, none of his friends could judge him because the Prophet Muhammad was 51 when he married his third wife, Aisha, and it is recorded she was but 6 years old when he married her, 45 years difference between the two. Every 3 to 4 months, Sheikh Ahmed visited his young Indian wife and spent a few weeks with her and then flew back to his country. Whenever he decided to visit, he would call in advance so that she could prepare for his stay with her. Every month he would send between 40 to 50,000 rupees to her. In a short time, Christy was a very wealthy woman. Filthy rich and loving every minute of it, she shared her new fortune with her boyfriend who lived with her without the benefit of marriage. Nevertheless, the secret lovers always felt there was something absent in their relationship and something preventing them from being truly happy. They did not belong to each other. Something was causing a terrible disturbance so it was like a branding iron igniting over coals of fire burning deep down into their inner souls. Unless that person was removed, they would not feel free to belong to each other. The lovers wanted to start a family and have children of their own and enjoy a real family life. So after a year and a half the lovers decided Christy would file for divorce and cut all ties that bind with her Saudi husband, benefits and all. She felt she had already given him enough of her body and she did not want to be tormented forever by having sex with a man old enough to be her grandfather. Besides, she had no love or respect for him. He had used his money to buy her from her family in their desperation, and as far as she was concerned, the debt was paid. Consequently, after 18 months, Christy went to Bandra court and filed for divorce from her Saudi husband. Her grounds for divorce were that her husband, Sheikh Ahmed, had cheated on her by marrying 2 Arab women, thereby committing adultery. The court in India, however, did not require any reason for the granting of a divorce. As long as one of the partners decided they wanted to leave the marriage, he or she could get a divorce from the other. Christy gave the court the address of her husband in Saudi Arabia. When Sheikh Ahmed received the divorce certificate from his Indian wife, his heart almost stopped. He thought he was going to have a heart attack. After he had overcome the initial shock and impact of this devastating news, he rushed back to India. He had never loved a woman more than Christy. She was young, pretty, and educated, whereas his Saudi wives were all old and illiterate. Their children had all grown up and gotten married and had children of their own. He cared materially for his wives, but Christy was his love. From Bombay Sahara International Airport, Sheikh Ahmed took a taxi and went to his ex-wife's villa in Bandstand Bandera. Only Bollywood film superstars and very wealthy Indians live in Bandstand. The place had a very beautiful view of the sea. The famous Sea Rock 5-star hotel was located in this beautiful paradise-like landscape. Many times, Sheikh Ahmed took his pretty Indian wife for dinner there and they would spend a few days at this magnificent hotel. Sometimes, they visited other hotels like the Oberoi Towers and the Taj Mahal Hotel and stayed overnight. Whenever Christy came for dinner or stayed at the Taj Mahal Hotel, her ex-co-workers, especially the housekeepers, envied her. From being a servant working in this grand hotel, she was now elevated to a queen, thanks to her new status as wife of a rich Saudi Arab. Whatever she wanted the old man provided her: food, drink, entertainment, anything she wanted. Always arrayed in the most expensive attire that only film actresses or wives of wealthy Indians could afford, she was lavished in whatever she fancied from head to foot: gold, pearls, diamonds. Whenever Sheikh Ahmed came to Bombay, his wife would usually pick him up in her expensive Mercedes-Benz automobile to take him to her villa. Christy had 2 other smaller cars as well. All 3 cars were bought for her by her wealthy Saudi husband. She also had 4 maidservants and 3 men servants in her mansion-like house. Each servant had different duties. The first maidservant did the cooking. The second maidservant washed the clothes and linens, and the third maidservant was the housekeeper and swept and cleaned the house. The fourth maidservant was a masseuse. Her duty was to massage Christy's body. The jobs of the men servants consisted of groundskeeping or gardening, another's job was to purchase necessities for the household, lastly, one was a secretary who took care of the bills and other accounts and expenses for the running of the household. Christy also had 2 male guards, one sat with his gun, guarding the house during the day, and the other during the night. Christy strictly warned her servants not to tell her Arab husband about her Indian boyfriend. She was paying them extra money to keep their mouths shut and to avert their eyes to her affair with Bobby. Christie also had 2 German Shepherd dogs for guarding her villa. She had a smaller adorable dog, which was her favorite and special pet. She did not have any children because it was never her intention to have a child with her husband the Sheikh. His desire, however, was for her to become pregnant because he believed that a child would keep her attached to him. She was smart in making excuses as to why she was not yet with child while using contraception and lying to her husband and deceiving him. However, after her divorce, she married her Indian boyfriend and she became pregnant almost immediately. She was 1 month pregnant when her ex-husband, the Saudi, came back to claim his most prized possession. When Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed reached his ex-wife's villa, he tried to enter but the watchman stopped him. Then, the watchman called Christie and informed her that her ex-husband had arrived and he was trying to enter the villa by force. Christie and her new husband came at once and confronted the angry old man. Sheikh Ahmed's anger intensified when he saw another man holding his beloved wife's hand. In his Muslim country, if a man came to his house and found a male stranger with his wife, he would kill him and his wife and the law would protect him in defending his honor. However, he was standing on Indian soil and Christie wasn't a Muslim woman to be scared by his threats or his anger. Nevertheless, Sheikh Ahmed continued to aggressively force his way into the house. He was barred entry by Christie's new husband, to whom the old man was certainly no match. Bobby was a big, tough guy and would have squashed him like a bug. Sheikh Ahmed shouted at Christie, "Who is this man and why have you allowed him to enter my house in my absence? This is my husband Bobby, and this is my house and it's in my name." Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed could not believe his ears when he heard his beloved Christie say she had married another man and claimed that he no longer had a right to enter the residence. A woman would never say something like that to a man in a Muslim country and expect to survive. Her husband would strangle her to death or cut her into pieces and her blood would be upon her head, for the law would clearly be on his side in this matter. He would not be condemned or prosecuted and he would be hailed in his society as a hero, receiving praise and glory for his bravery. If there was ever a need for an honor killing, this was it. But Sheikh Ahmed could do nothing to exact justice that day. When he refused to leave, Christie called the police and he was escorted off the property in an undignified manner, one befitting an unwanted guest and trespasser. After that, the angry old man sought help from some foreign students studying at Bombay University who had come from various Arab countries. The Arab students collectively advised him to forget about this Christian woman and return to his country. Moreover, they told him that if he tried to harm his ex-wife or her new husband he would land in jail and rot in an Indian prison. Sheikh Ahmed did not listen to the advice of the foreign students. He was determined to seek revenge and right this wrong. He took with him one Sudanese student and sought the advice and aid of a lawyer who was also an Indian Muslim. The lawyer knew only too well that the secular Indian laws could not force a woman to stay with a man she did not want to live with and had already divorced. His client could not receive recompense for all the money he spent during his marriage or for the 2 homes he had bought for his ex-wife and her family. Both houses were registered in Christie's name and that was that. Despite that, the greedy Indian lawyer accepted the case and promised to fight it in court with due diligence. He told Sheikh Ahmed the case might take a long time before the court would come to rule in his favor. In India, if the client happened to be a rich foreigner, the lawyer might conspire with the judge and ask him to keep prolonging the case for years. During this long period of waiting for the final ruling, the lawyer and the judge would drain the wealthy client, making him a little less richer, or to the point where he would spend no more to pursue the case. While the court proceedings were going on, someone advised Sheikh Ahmed to go and seek the help of one of the greatest politicians in Bombay. The person that Sheikh Ahmed was told to go to was a famous politician and gangster. He was the leader of the anti-Muslim political party known as Shiv Sena, or Army of Shivaji. Shivaji was an ancient Indian warrior who stopped the advance of Muslims in Bombay. He defeated them and rooted them out of Maharashtra state. The name of the political leader was Bale Thackeray. Thackeray was responsible for the destruction of the Babri Mosque in Ayodhya city. He stirred up the religious sentiments of the Hindus by convincing them that the Muslims built their mosque in the birthplace of their Hindu god Rama. Historically speaking, Thackeray was right. 200 years before, during their invasion of India, Muslims destroyed the temple of the Hindu god Rama, and built in its place a mosque. According to the Belgian historian, Conrad Elst, the Muslim conquests, down to the 16th century were for the Hindus, a pure struggle of life and death. Entire cities were burnt down and the population massacred, with hundreds of thousands killed in every campaign, and similar numbers deported as slaves. Every new invader often literally built his own hills made of Hindus' skulls. As a contribution to research on the quantity of the Islamic crimes against humanity, we may mention that the Indian subcontinent population decreased by 80 million between the year 1000, conquest of Afghanistan, and 1525, end of Delhi Sultanate. The American historian, Will Durant states, the Islamic conquest of India is probably the bloodiest story in history. It is a discouraging tale, for its evident moral is that civilization is a precious good, whose delicate complex of order and freedom, culture and peace, can at any moment be overthrown by barbarians invading from without, or multiplying within. The Indian philosopher, Swami Vivekananda, who gained masterly in the Islamic history, says about the Muslim invaders, their watchword is, there is one God, Allah, and Mohammed is his prophet. Everything beyond that not only is bad, but must be destroyed forthwith, at a moment's notice. Every man or woman who does not exactly believe in that must be killed, everything that does not belong to this worship must be immediately broken, every book that teaches anything else must be burnt. From the Pacific to the Atlantic, for 500 years blood ran all over the world. That is Mohammedanism, Islam. Bail Thackeray told his Hindu followers to travel to Ayodhya and destroy the Muslim mosque and rebuild the temple of their god Rama. In retaliation, the Muslims planted bombs in 13 important government buildings and hotels in Bombay City. The bombs were loaded in cars and parked near the Stock Exchange Building, Air India Building, Taj Mahal Hotel, Sea Rock Hotel. Those, among others, were targeted. Most of these buildings were skyscrapers and had many floors, offices, stores, and other rooms. All the cars exploded at the same time and killed many innocent people. It was a Friday afternoon when this cowardly terrorist attack took place. Those who planned the attacks chose Friday afternoon because most Muslims would, at that time, be at their mosques conducting the compulsory public prayer. The Muslim terrorists did not want any Muslims to be caught in the buildings and killed. After the terrorist attack, a lot of fighting ensued between the Hindus and the Muslims. Due to the fighting, the city was placed under a strict curfew. During the rioting, Hindus and Muslims slaughtered each other like wild animals. Some people were burned alive. A man was identified as a Hindu or a Muslim through the checking of his private parts. If he happened to be circumcised, then he was a Muslim and he would be burned by Hindus, and if he happened to be uncircumcised, then he was a Hindu and he would be burned by Muslims. In case of the female, her dress would identify her. Therefore, the woman would not be stripped fully naked to see whether she was genitally mutilated because the Indian Muslims do not practice female genital mutilation. The person who advised Sheikh Ahmed to go to Bail Thackeray to help him was either stupid, ignorant, hated him or simply wanted to add to his troubles. Luckily, before he approached the political gangster, Thackeray, the old man went to his Sudanese friend and requested he accompany him on his visit to the great political leader. The Sudanese student told him never to go to that anti-Muslim leader from the Hindu Shiv political party. He narrated the story to him of what this man did to the Muslims' mosque in Ayodhya city, and the consequences that followed, and what his political party stands for. Therefore, following the advice of his Sudanese friend, Sheikh Ahmed decided against this idea of approaching Mr. Bail Thackeray and returned to his country, a very sad man with a broken heart. The loss of money and property did not trouble him as much as the loss of his adored and beloved young wife. For 2 years, every 3 to 4 months Sheikh Ahmed was called by his lawyer to come to India to attend hearings concerning his grievances against the divorce and loss of his wife and estate. After 2 years, the case still had not been resolved and Sheikh Ahmed became exhausted with all the court proceedings. He realized his dispute with Christie was nothing more than a never-ending battle. He was fed up with all the trials and arguments and told his lawyer to forget about continuing the case and to withdraw the lawsuit. By the time Sheikh Ahmed finally gave up his fight and accepted defeat, his ex-wife had delivered her second child. She had a baby boy and a baby girl when he saw her for the last time at Bandera Court. Christie had become one of the richest women in the city of Bombay. After she left her Saudi husband and married her Indian boyfriend, she started many businesses and became very successful in her ventures, adding to her wealth.